Hello and welcome to a special episode of Fingering the Pulse. Today we will be discussing the new Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. My name is Patrick and I am joined today by my favorite Gray Man fan, Austin. Hello.
How's it? Hello. How's it going?
I'm alright. How's Gray Man today? Is he doing alright? What's he up to?
That movie is looking better after the one I just watched. I'm just
Uh-oh.
kidding.
Uh-oh.
Just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Oh boy. It's one of those days, fellas. Alright. So yeah, do we want to just jump right in? Full
Yeah.
disclosure, full spoilers. We're just gonna jump right. We're not gonna tiptoe around anything. We're just gonna spoil the shit out
Nope.
of this movie. So if you don't come back, if you haven't seen it, we'll be here. Yay. So yeah. I think you were chomping at the bit to give your spicy takes. You want to jump in first?
Oh, oh man. This movie uh was very disappointing for me. I think that it was the central premise of this movie kind of ruined it. I we if you watch the video where we ranked the Mission Impossible movies, I had a conversation about what makes a good villain in one of these movies, and I think that the uh, faceless, nameless entity kind of ruins this entire movie because I at no point ever felt any real tension with Tom Cruise slash Ethan Hunt because there's not an actual person there other than Gabriel who is like actually just like a recreation of the theological Gabriel and so much as he's like a figurehead for the um entity, the godlike entity. And so it never felt like there was any real emotional tension in this movie for me. I didn't feel like I would like it was a fight against anything real the entire time. And the invention of a person that this Gabriel character kills in Tom Cruise's backstory that we never hear anything about, it kind of comes out of nowhere. And I didn't feel anything for it because I didn't know that person. Like
Mm-hmm.
you compare it to like Mission Impossible 3, where we have Michelle Monaghan, who we have this whole opening sequence that builds the emotional um, connection between the two of them, and you have like kind of a feeling, an emotional connection to her when she is kidnapped by Owen Davian, and I didn't get that in this one. I never got the connection between Peggy Carter and Ethan Hunt. I didn't
Mm.
think that there was any real like connection there. So the like three-way, you need to choose one or the other between Ilsa or her, didn't really do it for me. I thought that they recreated the Russian police guy problem from Mission Impossible 4. Is that
Yeah, that was
was it
for.
4?
Yeah.
With the two Degas and the gray-haired guy
Mm-hmm.
that were just chasing him around the whole time. And I don't know, because like some of the action was good, but it just felt like every scene was like just held on too long. Every time they were having a conversation, the conversations were too prolonged. Every action scene felt like it was like just a couple of beats too long. And so I I spent a lot of this movie just kind of saddened because I wanted it to be really good. And although the action is still good, the like story behind it was just not it for me. Other than kind of like up to the point when they did the Mission Impossible like title sequence in the beginning was good, and then kind
Mm-hmm.
of after that, as the AI became the central piece of it, it didn't do it for me. And so this movie is 2 hours and 45 minutes long, and it really felt like it was because
Mm-hmm.
everything kept dragging.
Yeah, I'll bounce off of that real quick. I agree that maybe we could have shortened this a bit. I think there were some scenes that dragged a bit, but I think my me checking my watch is more due to the pacing. I don't know. I think the action scenes were serviceable, but like none of them stood out like when I think of Fallout or Rogue Nation, I think of, him holding onto the plane as it's taken off, or I think of the Halo jump. This one, it's like the one scene they were heavily promoting was him biking off that cliff, and not that it wasn't fun to watch, but like it wasn't. I didn't get that feeling in my stomach that I did when he's holding onto that plane for dear life. Um, and then you follow that up with a fun train sequence, but then when it's falling off the rails, it's mostly CG, and that bums me
It was
out.
so long.
But
We
like
kept going from rail car to rail car, and I'm like, stop.
even then, like I was still having a good time. Like that's the one sequence I'll push back on. I think that was, well, it might have been a bit long. I did enjoy it. Um, but I am probably going to disagree with you to an extent on the AI bit. I think having a faceless entity, as they call it, definitely makes it harder for me to be intimidated by this villain that is able to predict things like steps ahead of where Ethan and his team are. But I will say the one scene where they're all talking with the White Widow and they have everyone gathered there. And you see the what we saw as a visual representation of the entity at the beginning of the movie, just everywhere. And I'm a dumb
Lots of woms the entire time.
lot of
Putting up
woms,
everything.
lot
It's
of
like,
woms.
why?
Um, but it was one of those things where it's like I saw the trailer. I'm like, that kind of looks, this looks like it could have been like what the entity looked like on that submarine. But then Gabriel's like, yeah, no, the entity's here, and it was one of those things where it's like it wasn't. He couldn't really see it, but like I felt it in a way, if that makes sense. Like I felt the presence of it, and maybe it was the WOMs, maybe it was the overabundance of WOMs, but like it was definitely that was like the closest I felt to being intimidated by it. But then that's like the rest. It's like, well, the threat that this entity poses is mostly represented by who Gabriel is, and I think I don't know. I didn't love Gabriel. I think the fact that he's some dude that Ethan has history with who killed someone that he cared about in the past. It's like, well, I know we're good at pulling shit out of our asses. It's Mission Impossible. We'll pull stuff out of people's backstories just to make this all make sense. But this one didn't click with me either. That being said, I did like how collected and calm that Gabriel was in just about every scene. Like the only time you really see him lose control is when he figures out he doesn't have the key and he screams, which is a bizarre scene, but like,
It didn't mesh with his character at all,
hmm
in my opinion.
yeah,
Like the
and
whole time, like as much as I didn't like Gabriel, I did think like in terms of the portrayal, it was like
hmm
really good because he
yeah,
basically played the like completely faithful soldier the entire time and never broke his faith. And like even when you had the thing like where he's counting down the clock and then he falls off into the
yeah,
truck, it's like he's has so much faith in the entity that everything's working out, and
yeah.
that works as a
hmm
character. And then that bit at the end just doesn't like mesh with the rest of that at all.
It feels to me like maybe the entity could have seen that coming but didn't, and I that doesn't add up for me personally. Just thinking about it
Especially
now.
because the entire movie they were doing that.
hmm
The entire movie, like 5 to 6 different times, there was pull the key out of someone's pocket and put it
Yeah.
in someone else's pocket and then pull the key from them. It's like they even did it in the scene. Now that I'm thinking about it, in the club when the entity was there,
Oh
they
yeah.
did it to Luca or
Zola.
Loco or whatever
Zola.
whatever his name
Yeah.
is, Zola. Um, so yeah, that I just yeah no.
Dude, every sleight of hand, like when Ethan first runs into I forget her character's name, but Haley Atwell's character, and he's doing all that like sleight of hand stuff, and it's like we haven't seen this since Mission Impossible 1, and there's a lot of that in this movie where it's like this reminds me of Mission Impossible 1, and I think that's intentional. We see, obviously Kittredge is back in this movie, and he hasn't been in any of these movies since the first one, but you get you see a lot of what's the director of the first one, like some of his like
Um,
standards, like
the
a lot
the
of Dutch angles.
incessant incessant Dutch angles
Mm-hmm.
every single time they're having a conversation. In
Yup.
like not even tense conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just a conversation between Ving Rhames and Ethan Hunt, like in a
Mm-hmm.
safe house, and
Yeah.
every single angle is like Dutch angled. And I'm like, what is happening?
It's so weird because like that first movie, while there are some out there concepts, it still feels almost a little more grounded than what the Mission Impossible's become. But you mix that directing style with where Mission Impossible is today, and it didn't mesh well with me. Like I fully appreciate and respect that the style they were going for by trying to imitate what they did in the first one, but like I don't know if it works personally. I will say I've thrown out a bunch of negatives. I did like this movie quite a bit. It's not my favorite, but I think the narrative they're presenting, and I don't love all the action. I do think this is a good first part of a larger story. Um, I will say I did like Haley Atwell's character quite a bit. I didn't like her relationship with Ethan a lot. It was a lot of flirting, and it just felt weird, especially when Ilsa's still in the picture, and then all of a sudden she's not in the picture, and it still felt weird. Like their relationship felt almost romantic still, even then. It's like this feels weird. Um, that being said, they had good chemistry, so it's like it was fun to watch. But in my head, I'm like, this feels off. Uh, that being said, too, talking about Ilsa, I could use more of the crew in this one. I could use more of the crew. Uh, so we see a little bit of Ilsa in the beginning of the movie when she's out in the desert, and we have that fun, sandstorm action scene, whatever. Um, and we get the first fake out of her being dead. But then we don't see her until like middle of the movie, and then like two scenes later, she's dead. Um, we get a little bit more Luther and Benji, but even then, it's not enough for me. I love the dynamic that we built with them over the last couple of movies, and we kind of just, I don't want to say throw it aside, but it's like
Yeah.
kind of on the sidelines a bit. Um, it really, to me, felt like we were focusing a lot more on Haley Atwell's character and getting her to join the crew, and I think that was to the disservice of the other members of the crew. Um, I will push back a little bit. I think I agree with you to an extent on the fact that Shea Wiggum's character is like that Russian cop in Four. I do think he gives off a lot of those vibes. I think I had a little bit more fun with Shea Wiggum's character though, just because like you have his partner. He's like, "Are you sure we should be hunting him down? Like maybe he's onto something." And, he's like looking for him at the airport, and he's and the skylight above him. You have that moment where it's like the Luke Hobbs from Fast Five moment where he like looks at Ethan Hunt and he starts shooting at Palm Clementive's character when they're in Venice. So I don't know. I didn't think he was absolutely essential to this movie, but I didn't hate it either. Um,
Here's my big problem with that. I mean, other than there is shades of the Russian cop, which I'm partially making as a joke, but I
mm-hmm.
don't think it's any better. Is he builds like they have this whole scene in the beginning where it's like he's the manifestation of destiny or whatever, like with
Yeah.
his character. And then this entire movie goes out of its way to make Ethan Hunt look like he's actually not that good at his job.
mm-hmm.
Like they Ethan Hunt is the butt of so many jokes in his ability to do things throughout this movie that like the theming is like fighting itself. Like they start the movie trying to be like the entity is all powerful and Ethan Hunt is also all powerful and it's two all powerfuls going against each other. And then over time in the movie, they just continue. Like the scene that really did it for me was Ethan Hunt, one of the best, if not the best, secret agent of all time, doesn't know how to pick the lock of a set of handcuffs, but every
Oh yeah.
single one else
Mm-hmm.
in the entire world does.
Yeah. That was
It's
a little
like,
weird.
come on.
Yeah.
And we continue to do that multiple times, like throughout this movie. Like the joke where he's like, I don't know how to make the car go forward. And I'm
Oh,
like,
that got a laugh out of me. That got me.
I I hated everything about that Fiat being in that entire scene. I think it actually ruined that action scene, which was otherwise a really good car chase. All of the gags with the Fiat just didn't do it for me. And the same
Mm.
thing, like I would have been fine with some version of the Atwell she doesn't know how to drive the car stuff, but it kept happening, and that
Yeah.
was part of why that scene ended up being so long that I was like, I can't even handle this car chase anymore. It's not. I'm just not having fun with it at this point.
There was that point where she's figuring out how to drive and she just drives in circles and it's like maybe 2 minutes too long.
They kept going. Like she literally did like 18 circles.
Yeah, and I think it was after 10, and I'm like, okay, we can move on. I'm done with
I'm
this.
just like, this is what I mean. There's just so many scenes like that where I'm like, this is just a little bit too long.
Mm-hmm.
And I even think, like, talking about the jump scene, right, where he's jumping off the cliff, if he doesn't stop and then have to rethink, like, go up this other area and then do this jump and then go,
Yeah.
if he would have just been like full faith, believing in Benji and just go off this cliff, it would have made that scene way better because
Mm-hmm.
there would have
Yep.
been so much more attention to it, and we would have got rid of the really dumb Benji joke where he's like, I'm under so much stress.
Yeah. Also, shout out to that scene because he lets the self-driving car drive him when they're fighting an all-powerful entity. Whatever. Um, yeah. No, I think that would have been a good show of Ethan's trust in Benji, and also we don't have to stop to make a joke at the expense of two of our really actually pretty smart characters. Uh, yeah, that did
So
bug me a
much
bit.
so much of the scenes that they did to play for jokes just didn't work for me.
Mm-hmm.
And in not so, and like if a joke doesn't work, right, like take a movie like Deadpool, right,
Right.
it's just jokes the entire time, and
Mm-hmm.
so some of them in hit will hit and some of them won't, but they're not detrimental to the characters almost ever.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the jokes in this didn't land and they were detrimental to what the characters are in these movies.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that made them like actually bad rather than just being like, it didn't work for me, that joke.
Yeah. I don't know. I think the slight majority worked for me, and also I don't think there were that anything that was too egregious as far as representing characters and stuff. Um, so I don't know, but I don't know. I will say
I think
too. Oh, go ahead.
the one really surprisingly good piece that came out of this movie was um Palm's playing the character that Palm played, which was
Mm-hmm.
just like like I don't know, you want to say like female John Wick in this movie. She barely ever says anything, just kind of grunts and does action. And like it was great because in a movie that was in a lot of ways not for me, she just was like all out on this character
Mm-hmm.
and like took it to the 10th degree on everything. Like
Yeah.
every aspect of it. Like she's at the club with like clown makeup on,
Yep.
like in her like it just was something that wasn't really played as a joke, but was just like extreme on every level that it could be and was
Mm-hmm.
like actually fun. And even like I liked the scene in when they were fighting in the little hallway, like alleyway,
Oh
to a
yeah.
point, and then at one point like they just kept pulling Ethan back
They
again
kept
and
getting
again
up.
and
Yep.
again.
Yep. I had the same
And
thought.
at a point again, it just became too much where I was like, all right, now I'm over this. Up until I didn't get the seriousness of the ending of that arc for her, where it was like, why did he spare my life? And then like when Gabriel says like, "Oh, you're gonna betray me because he saved your life," that came out of nowhere to me. Like, it
Mm.
didn't even register in my brain until they were having the conversation when she's dying at the end.
Yeah.
That was all going back to him just swinging the pipe over her head. I was like, "Wait, what?" Like
Mm-hmm.
that the storyline didn't come together at the end for me all that well, but she was one of my favorite parts of this movie because she just full committed to everything and the ridiculousness of it.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off that because I've heard people like complain about her, but I honestly really liked her too. I think what made her work, I think what made me like her maybe a little bit more than you did. I think there was a moment, and I'm trying to remember when. I can't place it, but it might have been at the meeting with Vanessa Kirby's character, where they're all just in the group there, and Gabriel's like, the entity's here. You hear the womp womps and stuff, and it's very brief. I almost am not sure if it was like meant to be in there or not, but like you see a look flash across Palm's face, and it's just like a brief like glance of like fear and like what have I gotten myself into almost. So then you see her, fight Ethan in that alleyway, and he like misses her and stuff, and then you see when Gabriel is interrogating Carrie Ellis's character, and she's right there, and you see she's not necessarily hesitant, but like she's not doing a whole lot to help, and he just turns on her and it's like, well, yeah, I can kind of see this, and I don't know. So that there wasn't really necessary any sort of logical leaps I had to make for that one. It all kind of ended up for me in the end. And she's still alive. They found a pulse. So there you go.
Is
Um,
that true? I didn't
yeah,
catch that part of it.
yeah.
I mean,
She
not that I got the part that she wasn't dead, but not that like she's gonna actually survive that.
No, yeah. Shea Wiggum's partner is like, yeah, I have a pulse after Ethan jumped out of the train. Um, yeah. Real quick, I
I will
want
say, go go.
I want to bring up Carrie Ellis's character because it works in the first scene he was in, and then when he's on the train, I'm like, I don't like this guy. He just sounds like Solid Snake at this point. This is just cartoonish. I didn't like it that much. Love Carrie Ellis though.
Yeah, he it. The funny thing is, he's playing like essentially a version of the character that he played in Stranger Things, where he's like the
Mm-hmm.
Schmarmy like government guy.
Yeah,
But it works in Stranger Things because everything about Stranger Things is this like otherworldly, over the top,
over the
like
yeah,
craziness.
amping it up and
And
yeah.
it doesn't work the same in this movie. Like you put him
Mm-mm.
next to Kittredge and his very serious like tone of voice that works as like a government
Mm-hmm.
agent against his, and you're like, why do you sound like that? Like I know what you sound like and what you look like, and that's not you.
Yeah,
And so yeah, I agree. It didn't work all that well for me. And yeah, I don't that one didn't work for me. But jumping like off that first scene, shout out to, is this, what is it, who makes this? Is it Warner Brothers from Paramount?
this is Skydance. I think it's technically Universal.
Because this is the first time I saw it was in the, oh, what's it called? The Harley Quinn movie, but not Harley Quinn.
Birds of
Oh,
Prey.
Birds of Prey. Where she has the gun that shoots like powder bullets essentially when she goes into the uh police precinct. Do you remember that scene?
I haven't seen Birds of Prey.
Oh man. That incredible special effect work with like the powdery substance that goes into
Mm-hmm.
the air. And they did that again here when he was dropping those like gas bombs.
Yeah, those are
And it
cool.
looks so cool. I don't know how they do it. I'm sure it's partially practical and partially CGI, but it looks so good on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that's a lot of fun. I every time that kept coming, that was really cool.
It's Paramount.
But um,
It's Paramount.
that it's just a random thought that I had that was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
The other piece of that, I thought it was, I don't know, the, if I'm getting too kind of like in the weeds about it now, but the like, we can't air gap our databases. We have to literally have a bunch of people with typewriters type them out.
Mm-hmm.
Was it? It didn't. I didn't really like that explanation of it because there are so many things that like the way that you know stop electronics from having problems is to air gap them. And so
Mm-hmm.
like it's, and the other part of it is that like the whole thing with the key is basically an air gap for the AI. So it's like
Right.
I don't understand how you can play both sides of that in this movie. Not that that's like a little, you know, technical nitpick there, not
Mm-hmm.
anything real, but a lot of that stuff where they're like, yeah, we had to get a satellite from the weather service that isn't digital. I'm just like,
Yeah, from like the
I don't
Cold War or
know.
whatever.
Yeah, I just, that stuff didn't play for me in any way that was like, I wasn't like, oh my God, this is so cool. We get to look at
Yeah.
them use old tech in an interesting way. It just, all it did was kind of further the point to me that I didn't like the AI as the villain of this character of this movie.
Yeah.
It all just kind of exacerbated the problem, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. That is ultimately that's not really something I made a huge note of. I think when Tom Cruise is disguised as that security detail walking through that warehouse where they're all like typing and stuff, I was like, that's it's a neat little piece of world building if you have like an electronic AI that could take over your systems and stuff. Like I'm sure there's workarounds like you said, airlocking and all that, but I thought it was a neat little touch of world building. I will. I want to shout out that scene where they had like all those big actors in, and they're all talking to Carrie Ellis. He had like Warlock from Top Gun Maverick. He had Indira Varma there, and I just that was a fun. That was a weirdly blocked scene because again, a lot of Dutch angles, a lot of
So
talking,
much.
a lot of talking heads. Like every sentence was like this dramatic. Oh, this AI could destroy the world, or this
I
key opens the vault to the world security, and it's just like every one sentence is said by someone else, and they're all good actors. So I'm just like, this is neat. I don't know. But like everything that comes after that in that scene, once Tom Cruise is like, "Hey, here's a gas mask," that was a really cool scene after that. But
hmm Yeah, there's just so many things where I'm like, yeah, I don't think you could make a great movie out of this for me just because I
hmm
didn't like the central villain. But there's a lot of action and talking scenes that I think could have been better if they were
hmm
just cut down slightly. Like
yeah,
they didn't need so much explanation
there was
in
a
these
lot.
talking scenes,
There was a
and they just
lot.
kept going. Even the one in the club when they're having that like conversation, like
Mm.
there's so much talking about it that I'm just like it's too much. Like you could have condensed this down so much and still gotten the same point across. And it bothered me even a little bit more in the club scene because at one point Gabriel's like, "You need to make a decision between the two women," and then
hmm
Ilsa just dies without Tom Cruise ever making a decision.
Well, he
Like they that
decided
just
on Haley Atwell's character. He's like, "Run as fast as you can," and looks at Haley Atwell and he's like, "You stick with me, I'll protect you." That was the choice.
yeah, but I don't think yeah okay I so if that's the case then I don't think it was played well because I that wasn't clear to me that that was the distinction that he was choosing Haley Atwell.
Mm.
Like, I just to me feels like he knows that Ilsa can handle herself because she's an MI6 agent
Right, and
and
that's why he picked Haley
Haley
Atwell.
can't.
Yeah.
But that's not the same thing as what Gabriel was asking him to make a decision. He was asking him to choose between the two people,
Right.
not choose who can handle things themselves.
Well, it was more
And
of
so
like I could go with Ilsa, and then we could just be a strong power couple, or I could go with Haley Atwell, who can't defend herself. That's kind of
right, but the thing is like he has to stay regardless because he has to get the key. So he told Ilsa to leave. There was no situation in which he could leave with Ilsa because he has to get the key. It's still in uh whatever the dude's name is, pocket, douchebag guy.
I could have gotten it. I don't know that I think that was I read it pretty easily. I kind of had a feeling where it was going anyway. I knew he would pick Haley Atwell just because
Well,
she can't
yeah, I
defend
mean I knew
herself.
that too just cuz it's being telegraphed that
Right.
like it was going to come down to that. But then when she dies in that scene, it missed for me because like I didn't understand like I didn't see that as the choice. It wasn't very clear to me. So then when she dies, I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, so what? When are we gonna get to the point where he has to choose?
Right.
So like and Tom Cruise doesn't even get to see it happen. So like I don't get any of the emotional buildup of it. Whereas like why doesn't he pop out a little bit farther down the canal and see as Gabriel stabs her, and then you can get the emotional play of seeing it happen and seeing his reaction to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so the emotional bits didn't really hit for me on
Yeah, that I will agree to a point on that. I think him showing up and she's already dead. I like the just how that's not like every other action movie where like a loved one dies and we spent 5 minutes in their arms just dying and talking and stuff. Like it's not getting a lot of points for switching it up, but like I thought it was an interesting switch. But I also that yeah, there wasn't a whole lot. I didn't really feel a whole lot when he found her on the bridge. I think what did hit a little harder was when I think the next scene after that is when he's leaning on that balcony where they were just leaning on like a few scenes ago, and I was like, oh, okay, I feel something here. But even then, it's like this is a character I've grown to love over the last couple of movies, and this is all I'm feeling that seems wrong.
that.
So
How do you feel about the way that they fleshed out how you become an IMF agent with it being a decision and you being a person who either goes to prison or joins the IMF?
I, I could see it working out for Ethan and Luther. I can see those. Well, we know that's how Luther got recruited. I think he's mentioned that before. But when they're switching between every member of his crew, and we switch to Benji, I'm like, what did Benji do? What could he have possibly done to be arrested and almost go to prison, but instead was given this choice? Like I thought, I just thought that was weird.
Well, and it also doesn't work because so how does it work for like an analyst like
Mm-hmm.
Jeremy Renner's character who like was he
Right.
like a hacker that like got caught trying to hack into the like DoD or something like
Yeah.
it it I don't think it works for Ethan because like the whole point of Ethan's character is like he's the person that puts everyone's life above his own and
Right.
always tries to save everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So like in what world was he like a someone breaking the law like a thief or something that he needed to be uh there's a chance that he was going to prison. I don't really understand that.
Yeah.
And I would rather them just kind of abandon this than even explain that to me. But I thought it was a turn that was not needed, and it like I think they could have just changed Haley's character a bit, or just had no. They could have just been like, Ethan believes in her, and so Kittredge will just back what Ethan's play
Right.
instead of like having to build this whole backstory for it.
That's almost what it played like towards the end too, where she's like, "He
Yeah,
said you could use me," and he's like, "Oh, interesting." You know?
yeah. Like you could have played it out all the same without that backstory, and I just didn't.
Yeah.
And again, like it didn't do anything for the Gabriel storyline for me because I didn't know anything about this person that Gabriel killed.
Right.
So like I don't it was a nothing of backstory that I just didn't like the way that it um sets up Ethan's backstory now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I definitely think they were saving that for part two for whatever reason.
Maybe.
It didn't necessarily play for me either. I'm right there with you. I thought, and it's been a minute since I've watched the first one, but I thought it was always the case that either Kittredge or John Boyd's character recruited Ethan to an extent. I honestly, it's been a while, so I might be misremembering things, but that was always the
Well, we
vibe I
also
got.
have we also have Mission Possible 3 as well,
Mm-hmm.
where he's like training, he's a IMF trainer
Yeah.
when he's like not going on mission. So like how does
Right.
that work? Not that this needs some like great, coherent backstory, but I'm just like you're creating problems for
Well,
no gain.
I can see them being like, well, maybe Carrie Russell's character had gotten a scuffle or something before Ethan trained her or whatever. You know, I could see that fitting. So I don't know. I agree. I don't think this whole choice thing it kind of came out of nowhere, and I don't know if it necessarily fits every piece that we've been presented with over the last 20, 30 years at this point. So I don't know. I could see it was definitely like the major like theme for the movie of like what choice are you making, especially for like Haley's character and just the IMF in general. But I agree. I don't know if it was necessarily needed. Uh, I don't know. I will say too, just the play on the usual like your mission should you choose to accept, like the variation of it at the end when Kittredge was given his monologue. That got me a little hyped up. I was like, that was kind of cool. That was kind of cool. A little bit of setup for the next one. Oh, which
I
I want to point out too that this felt like an actual movie and not like we're hard cutting this. You have to wait a couple years for the next one. Kind of an ending. I really appreciate that this felt like this. Obviously it's still part one, but like it felt like this is a three act structure right here on its own, almost.
mhm.
So
I'm not exactly sure. Yeah, I mean, it feels like it's probably like that was a good spot to end it, just because like once you get past that point, it really turns to an entirely different kind of a story. Because like
hmm
this is really like MacGuffin chase,
yeah,
and it's gonna go to like more like in my head at least, it's going more towards like a national treasure. You have to find the clues to get to the Sevastopol.
hmm
So it feels like the right point to end that movie, and it was already so long that like
yeah,
it definitely needed to be two movies for what they were trying to do, even though this one could have probably cut a half hour off it and been the exact same movie, but
Hmm.
um, it probably does need two movies.
Yeah, for sure, for
I
sure.
don't get the Dead Reckoning thing though. Like they say
Mhm.
the words Dead Reckoning in
Yeah,
the movie, but I never really understood how it connects. Like Rogue Nation and Fallout make sense,
yeah.
and they just kind of say Dead Reckoning. It doesn't really like
They say it.
equate to what's happening.
No, and I want to say it's probably some sort of metaphor maybe for what Ethan's character will go through over this movie and part two. Because I think the rumor I heard that this will be Tom Cruise's last Mission Impossible, the next one. So this is kind of like a send off for him. So maybe it has something to do with that. But even then, I don't know. It still feels like a stretch. I mean, it sounds cool. Maybe that's why they went with it. But I don't know.
I want to know if they decided to, if it was in the script first and then they decided to call it that, or if they decided to call it that and so then they put it in the script because one
Yeah.
of those is
Mm-hmm.
definitely better than the other.
Agreed.
And to me, I think it's the latter, which would be worse.
Yeah, for sure. Okay.
All right. Any other thoughts? Or you want to place this on our rankings list?
Oh, well, nothing big. There was a point where I really had to go to the bathroom, but I didn't want to leave, so that really made this movie feel a little longer. But yeah, I had a good time. I had a good time. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. I'm ready to rank if you don't have any closing thoughts.
Nope.
All right, all right, all right. I think if I had to place this right now, I'd probably put Dead Reckoning Part 1 under Ghost Protocol. Yeah, I'd probably put that there.
I had a hard time with this one for me,
Hmm.
and I it'll probably change over time because, but like in the moment, I really wanted to put this one last. Like I really did. Um, there, because like the thing is, there's a lot of stuff about Mission Impossible 2 that is redeemable for me. I
Sure.
think that there's still a lot of action stuff that works. The but there has a lot of the similar problems to this one. I don't think the central romance works. The villain's kind of dumb.
Hmm.
However, I will leave Mission Impossible 2 at last because this movie is at least not sexist.
Yeah.
And so I will place Dead Reckoning Part 1 at sixth on my list.
All right, all right. Well, those are our general thoughts on Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. We will come back to this list whenever Part 2 comes out, in 10 years from now, whenever this strike's over. Um, so stay tuned for that. In the meanwhile, we do have some cool projects coming up. We'll be talking about Barbenheimer very soon, so keep an eye out for that. Otherwise, follow us on our socials: Twitter, Instagram. We stream Monday, Thursdays with some occasional weekend streams here and there. Um, yeah. Anything else you want to leave the viewers with, Austin? Or
Mm, I did. Did you side note? Well, I guess
hmm.
it's kind of part of the ending. But did you know that Dead Reckoning Part 2 was already like deep in production because it got can't or got
Hmm.
postponed because of the actor strike? I was like, how is it that far along? That's
Yeah.
crazy.
It was like the Spider Verse deal where the next one was scheduled to be like early next year. But I actually think that Dead Reckoning Part 2 had more work on it done than Spider Verse Part 2 did, because that one hasn't even started as far as I know. But uh,
Mm.
I did know it was further along in production, so I was a little, I guess, not too surprised to see that it'll probably be delayed. Also, I forgot to mention, I saw this in IMAX, and that was worth the price of admission. This looked good in IMAX. Not as good as like Fallout did, but anyway,
Well, this one had so much CGI in it.
a lot of CGI that did take me out of it for sure. But
Anyway, my ending thought is hopefully the next one's better.
agreed. So yeah, we've been Obscure Reference. We'll catch you on the flippity flip. Yeah, see ya.